नमः सभाभ्यः सभापतिभ्यश्च। आदिशंकर ने कहा था कि गौड़पादाचार्य उनके परम गुरु है, तो ऐसे कोट वेंकटाचलम जी इज द परम गुरु ऑफ अस, सो दैट्स व्हाई से वेंकटाचल पर्यंतम वंदे गुरु परंपरा. Actually, when I read the plot in chronology, what I thought, let me verify through the epigraphic evidence if some Cyrus era ever existed or Malavagana era ever existed. That led me to a two different conclusion, but somewhere closer to the what Kota Venkatachalam gives the conclusion. Actually, this epoch of Buddha Nirvana is one of the most important sheet anchors of Indian chronology. केवल इंडिया का ही नहीं है, इवन श्रीलंका, बर्मा, तिब्बत, इवन सम एक्सटेंट साउथ ईस्ट एशिया उनके देशों का भी है. लेकिन मॉडर्न हिस्टोरियंस ने जो डेट दिया है वो 483 BC, बट मेरा जो रिसर्च इंडिकेट करता है 1865 BC. There is a huge gap of 1382 years. All you may be wondering how I am going to explain it, but before understanding it, let us understand how the eminent historians comes out of the date of 483 BC. So they came to India within fascination of Alexander's history, his invasion on India, some Indian king Sandrocotus, contemporary of Alexander. So उनका एक डेट है 330-323 BC ये अलेक्जेंडर. लेकिन आज तक किसी भी इंडियंस ने ये पूछा कि ये डेट आपने कहाँ से लेके आए, क्योंकि हम उनका पढ़ते नहीं, अपना भी नहीं पढ़ते. तो जो कुछ अपना है तो उनका हमने आंख मूंद के मान लिया कि अंग्रेज गलत नहीं हो सकता. तो मैं भी अभी मान लेता हूँ कि अंग्रेज गलत नहीं है. दिस इज द डेट 332-323 and he died 323. Since Sandrocotus was the contemporary of Seleucus, so there is no way you can afford to put Chandragupta prior to Alexander. So इसलिए 323 को मान लिया गया है कि चंद्रगुप्त का राज्याभिषेक हो गया. So this Sir William Jones, whether he is a sir or not, I don't know, but he established in 1785 after the first annual session of Asiatic Society of Bengal. So based on that, वो genealogy arrange किया गया, जैसे चंद्रगुप्त 322-297, बिंदुसारा, Ashoka 268. 268 is the first regnal year of Ashoka. So based on that, what they did, they just back calculated 218 years, so 483 BC. How 218? Because Sri Lankan chronicles, Mahavansha, Deepavansha talk about Ashoka's consecration in the year 268 from Buddha Nirvana. Now, till the calculation is based on an assumption. What is that assumption? Contemporaneity of Sandrocotus. Okay, again, they have searched for some traditional, whether any traditional evidence exists. So they found a Burmese epoch. There is an epoch of Prom city that राजा सुमुंद्री बर्मा का, वो उन्होंने अपना कैपिटल प्रोम सिटी को बनाया 623rd ईयर. बस इससे ज़्यादा कोई अधिक रेफरेंस नहीं. इन्होंने क्या किया, 78 AD से बैक कैलकुलेट कर दिया 623. सो दे अराइव्ड 545 BC. बट बर्मीज इंस्क्रिप्शंस में Buddha Nirvana and Shakaira both have been mentioned. The difference between both the eras is 1182 years. So what they did, the Shakaira referred to in Burmese inscription is the Burmese era. I don't know why a Burmese era introduced. It is not a Burmese era, actually a Burmese astronomers introduced a Surya Siddhanta calendar in 638 AD. What British historians did smartly, they calculated 1182 years backwards from 638 AD. Now they are at 544. How can they have a 545 or 541? 1 year is negligible. Okay, let us, some way they squeezed 1 year, say 544 BC, that they have established the date of Buddha Nirvana. But still it is 60 to 61 years away from the what they were expecting. 480, because that is a tailor-made year. They can't afford to put 1 year before or 1 year after, because the 323 Alexander's date and Sandrocotus contemporaneity is sacrosanct. Then finally they said there is no traditional, so they demonized Indian records, Sri Lankan and everything. Then there is a reference they found in Chinese sources. There is a dotted record, means Upali, he was the first person in the first Buddhist council, he recited the Vinaya Pitaka. So in that manuscript, he put one dot indicating the first year. So 975th dot has been put by Sanghabhadra. So this 975th year, what they did, they again started from 483 BC, calculated 975 years, so 489 AD. So then they searched some Chinese king who was their contemporary of Sanghabhadra. Then says this is the king who was there. This is but J. Takakasu, he is the Chinese historian. He says that it can come maximum 486. So at least 3 years error. Then one more Chinese historian, they say somebody put 3 extra dots. So now you see the methodology of eminent historian. So I have only one picture better, so which can depict how historians fixed the eminent historians arrived the 483 BC. Just an assumptions. Since that was going away, so they simply pushing back the year towards 483 BC. So the methodology of eminent historians is completely based on selective acceptance, selective rejection. Then they say this selective rejection is always required because you have to follow the sheet anchor. So then again sheet anchor is an assumption. It's not it don't have any evidence to establish the contemporaneity of Chandragupta Maurya and Alexander. But an assumption has been taken as a sheet anchor. So now more than 95% of Buddhist sources mention that Ashoka जो है 100th year में he became the king of Magadha. But almost 99% of eminent historian rejected this. Any explanation? Till date, no one gave any explanation. Say that okay, Indians don't know history, they don't have no chronological sense. This is the only just blaming the Indians. Then long chronology, this is the 218th year mentioned in Sri Lankan sources. Then there is a contradiction in this one. You cannot have explain both. You have to select either one. So whatever is convenient for us, we accept. What is inconvenient, we simply brush aside. Now Adi Shankara's traditional date 6th century BC, as per all 3-4 matas. Only Sringeri, even that is the 1st century BC. Later they accepted the 788, maybe 1960 around, under the influence of our great communist historians. Then Persians, they talk about Zarathustra, the Zoroaster. He was almost 258 years before Alexander. The Zoroaster flourished. But in all Persian records, it is mentioned that, like if you read the Al-Biruni, in former times, Khorasan, Russia, Iraq, Mosul, and the country up to the Syria was Buddhistic. It means before the birth of Zoroaster, Buddhism spread to up to Syria. But modern historians date Zoroaster 628 AD and 550, means Buddha was hardly 10 years old when Zoroaster died. Abu Rehan, he gives a list of pseudo prophets. He starts from Buddha. Thereafter, he dates Zoroaster. There is a chapter in his book, Abu Rehan's book, the pseudo prophets. Then he establishes the real prophet is Muhammad, but he gives the names of first Buddha, thereafter Zoroaster. There is another guy, I am forgetting his name. So Persian history is absolutely clear. Buddha lived before Zoroaster, but they selectively rejected this also because nowhere this comes near to the tailor-made date of 483 BC. Then we select this Lumbini because this is the earliest Buddhist shrine, because the Rumindei pillar inscription, it is mentioned in that inscription that Ashoka visited in his 20th regnal year, and he visited the Buddha's birthplace, and he made Lumbini tax free. That time tax was almost 1/8, 12.5% GST was applicable that time. So he just made the Lumbini village tax free. So 20th regnal year of Ashoka, a Buddhist structure existed in Lumbini. So what happened actually, the brick structure, what is available, this was excavated somewhere 1940 or some 30. They said this is the structure constructed by Ashoka because they got some carbon dating around 3rd century BC. They did not excavate further because they don't need, because they have already assumed the chronology. What happened in 2005 or along 10 years back, a tree near to this brick structure, it grown up so big that threatening to this archaeological structure. So they wanted to relocate it. So they took the help of Japanese technicians. While relocating, two trenches got created. There's a C5 and C4. C4 that exposed the earlier structure under this under the brick structure. तो उनका इन्होंने कार्बन डेटिंग किया वेरियस लेयर्स में. दे वेंट अप टू द नेचुरल सॉइल लेवल. उसका डेटिंग आता है 1681 1521 BC. बट whatever the carbon dating, but I question the carbon dating methodology also, since the business logic behind the carbon dating is biased to the whatever the chronology known to us. So we think that 3rd century BC is the Mauryan dating. So based on that, the even because entire world is suffering from some chronological errors, so the whatever the business logic is has to be, generally they calibrate the dates. The methodology, the business logic of calibration needs to be reviewed once chronology is settled for the entire world. But even we will take it. So finally, the Cunningham, there was, I don't know why all cunning people join archaeology. So this Cunningham, there was another Cunningham exists. There's a second Cunningham from Durham. So he says very cunningly, though the Lumbini gives a very much earlier date than 483 BC, but some earlier cult, religious cults existed before Buddha. That is true. Vipashi, Shikhi, Krakuchanda, Kanaka Muni, and Kashyapa, 6 Buddhas existed before him. So Shakya Muni cult existed before the historical Buddha. So we cannot deny. But whether Lumbini, as per the history, Buddha was born when Maya Devi went to an orchard or there was no structure existed. After the birth only some structure came up. There is no history of any early religious caste ever existed in Lumbini. लुम्बिनी का कोई मतलब ही नहीं था, क्योंकि लुम्बिनी जस्ट कपिलवस्तु के नियर पास में एक उद्यान था, वहाँ गए थे, सडनली द बुद्ध वाज बॉर्न देयर. सो दैट्स ऑल. सो आर्कियोलॉजी के लिए सारे एक्सक्यूजेस है, तो आर्कियोलॉजी कैन नॉट गिव अस एन एग्जैक्ट, इट कैन ओनली सजेस्ट ए बैंड, अ टाइम बैंड. बट वी नीड टू मोर डिग इन टू द हाउ अवर ऑल एंटायर लिटरेरी एविडेंस, पुराणिक, बुद्धिस्ट, जैन, all how they lead to it. So first, this is the well known. I have read 3162 BC based on the epigraphic evidence of Aihole inscription. I fixed that. I'll just explain later. So this is the Puranic date. The before Nandas only Buddha's birth is possible. Buddha Nirvana also before Nandas. Rajatarangini only says, because they don't say directly, but Rajatarangini says the Hushka, Jushka, Kanishka, Turushka kings, they became the kings of Kashmir after 150 years after Buddha Nirvana. It means, but he calculates only 1266 years. So Hushka, Jushka, Kanishka reigned before that. If you calculate from Mahabharata, then it comes 21772 to 2077 BC, somewhere that. How this error? Because Nandas were 1500. Actually, Puranas talk about the Nandas coronation 1050. Some talk about 1500. This miscalculation of years led to Kalhana to assume that the Buddha Nirvana was somewhere 1000 years after Mahabharata. Then let us talk about later Magadha and Nepal, because Buddhism revived after when Adi Shankara, Buddhism declined. Later during the Pala period, Pala dynasty of Bengal, the Magadha Nepal tradition revived. So there is a inscription in Gaya, Bhagavati Parinirvrite Samvat 1813 Kartika. So it is referring to 1813th year of Buddha Nirvana. How can we? Nepal manuscripts refer to Shakaira as well as Buddha Nirvana. So the difference is 617 years between Shakaira and Buddha Nirvana. There is a Sumati Tantra written by a Jain astronomer. He belonged to Karnataka, but they might have migrated to Nepal. So he talks about Nanda's reign after 2000 years. This is a very this does not follow the Puranic tradition. Why this? I'll just explain later. There is another inscription. This great JF fleet, the faithfuls, is the faithful fleet. He faithfully says that this is the very later inscription. I don't know. He says somewhere 1884. Already, I think Indian Antiquary's 10th or 12th volume was published. I don't know who did this mischief and went to Gaya and inscribed this epigraph there. But actually, this is a much later. The paleography indicates this cannot be a 19th century inscription. But still, no one has ever objected the methodology of JF fleet. So let us, the Burmese tradition, because Burmese tradition, 19 inscriptions refer to both Shakaira as well as Buddha Nirvana. Generally, they don't refer as a Buddha Nirvana in the initial, they call it Jina Chakra, and they call it Buddha Dhamma. So it is more, they are talking about a Buddha religion era. Nirvana came later. Why that? So the difference is 1182 years. Most of the, only one inscription says 1197 year. There is one more literary evidence, Shasana Vansha. It's a Burmese chronicle, the way Mahavansha, Deepavansha is Sri Lankan. So the Shasana Vansha also gives a date in Buddha Nirvana as well as Shakaira. The difference is 1182 years. Then Tibetan tradition, it revived only somewhere when Shakya Bhadra from Vikramashila he migrated to. So there are too many dates which actually the Sakyapa tradition, they simply mention one day. They don't mention whether it's a Buddha Nirvana or there is no reference at all, just a date. It appears that some Chinese date they have adopted. The colonial historians assume that it may be an ancient Buddha date. If you, there are actually two monumental blunders in Indian chronology. So this is what Shaka and Shakanta difference. Actually, it needs at least a separate session to explain me. But there is a Kurtakoti one place. Copper plate refers to Vaishakha Jyeshtha Madhyamamavasyayam Rohinyarikshe Mahadevatayor Ubhayor Vrishabharasho Tasmin Vrishabharasho Sarvagrasi Bhute. It refers to a total solar eclipse that occurred in between that Vaishakha Amavasya. Why he is saying Jyeshtha? Because he want to eliminate the intercalary month. That's why he is referring to Vaishakha Masa Amavasyas, Vaishakha Jyeshtha Madhyama Amavasya and Rohinyarikshe. So Vaishakha Masa can only possible somewhere in the May. So I have taken a band of 1500 BC to 1500 AD, 3000 years in Badami, because Kurtakoti is just near to the Badami. 10 total solar eclipses took place. None out of one only occurred in the May. This conclusively, and he is referring to 530 Shakaira. And Jyotirvidavaranam, Kalidasa says, I am writing the book in 3068 Kali Yuga. Still he refers to 445 Shakaira for the Ayanansha. Then how this is possible? Somebody forged. I don't know why somebody will forge a book and for Kalidasa. There are too many doubting Thomases in the history field. So it is not only one solar. I have analyzed more than 85 solar eclipses, as well as literary like Bhaskaracharya, Shakandripa Syante Kaler Vatsaraha. He is talking about at the end of Shakandripa, 3179 years elapsed from the Kali Yuga to indicate 78 AD. 78 AD is not an epoch introduced by any king. Actually, it is an Indian astronomers introduced, because before 78 AD, already Ayanansha concept was evolved. Varahamihira refers, even Kalidasa refers, maybe even Brahmagupta. Actually, 1st April 78 AD is the Chaitra Shukla Pratipada. Sun, Moon and Jupiter were in a perfect conjunction. Jupiter conjunction is very much relevant for calculation of Ayanansha. So this is only Indian astronomers introduced this epoch. So what they have said, they just as a Shakan Repa Kalatita Samvatsara or Shakan Repanta. There is a one Madhurantaka Deva in Chhattisgarh. He refers to Shakan Repa Kalatita Samvat. And again he starts again Atita. Twice Atita words have been used in. So those will be meaningless why you are using twice. If it is elapsed year or actually a Shaka era and Shakan Repa Atita era, both are two different epochs. So epigraphic references, so there is a gap of 661 years. This is the one chronological error, 661 years. And second monumental blunder is we all know that Bhadrabahu's disciple was Chandragupta, so he is the Chandragupta Maurya. Actually, later Jain historians committed this blunder. Chandragupta Maurya was not the disciple of Bhadrabahu, because entire even Karnataka tradition, the Kannada Panchatantra, Rajavali Kathe, they all refer it to some Gupta Vansha, Chandragupta of Ujjain, who became a king in 158th year of Mahavira Nirvana era. So due to that, another 660 years, because we made Mahavira and Buddha as contemporaries. This is the reason why we are not able to reconcile Puranic genealogy, Buddhist and Jainist, because these three sources are talking about three different eras. There are then what is the true epoch of? So first is he was before Nanda, then Rajatarangini 2000, that is only, I assume that this is the error due to 1050 or 1500, that is the one. And Burmese Sri Lanka Buddha Nirvana, there is a Shaka and Buddha Nirvana 1182 years gap. So if you calculate 583 BC, it goes to 1765 BC. But if you calculate 78, it goes to 1104. If you calculate from 638 as a Burmese epoch, then 544. So colonial historians thought this is the best date to accept it. They said it is only 544 BC. Okay. Then Magadha Nepal tradition, it talks about only 617 years. Why? Because that Sumati Tantra, Jains started already, because before Buddhism revived in Bengal, Jainism was flourishing in India. So already the mistaken identity of Chandragupta of Ujjain as a Chandragupta Maurya already established. So this is the reason why the later Magadha and Nepal tradition talks about only 617 instead of 1182 years. So the long chronology and short chronology is only a mix-up of two epochs. One is Theravada Buddhism, because in the first Buddhist council, Buddhism split into two schools. One is Mahasanghikas and Theravadas. So the Burmese and Sri Lankans always followed the Theravada Buddha. They are Theravadis. So they followed only 7. Later that date converted into a Buddha Nirvana. Since there were 318 years for the Maurya Ashoka, but it became 218. That's why they only say that Nanda's ruled only 22 years, where Puranas talk about 100 years. Because they have to, even Sri Lankan chronicles talk about a Kala Ashoka who ascended the throne in the 100th year. But in our history books, there is no reference of Kala Ashoka. Who was there? Kala Ashoka. Because Divyavadana, even many, they talk about an Ashoka who became king in the 100th year. So, based on the Sri Lankan and Burmese epoch, that is become 1765 BC, that is the date of first Buddhist council when Theravada Buddhism came into existence. So we have to go to 100 years before. That's why 1865 BC. If we consider 0 year between first AD, first BC, then it should be 1864. Now this Buddha Purnima, I don't know how this came into practice. We all celebrate Purnima, but it appears that he attained Nirvana on Purnima. Whether he was born on Purnima or not, in Ashwaghosha talks about he Tataha Prasannashta Babhuva Pushya. It appears that he was born in Pushya Nakshatra. Vaishakha Purnima is not possible in Pushya Nakshatra. It has to be either Shashti, Vaishakha Shashti or Vaishakha Saptami. So the date would be 11th April 1865 BC. In case it is Purnima, then it is the 19th April. Then date of enlightenment, after 35 years, he attained Nirvana and Buddha, Theravada Buddhism. There is another Nirvana references in the Buddhist sources like Gilgit manuscript. There is a Vajrapani. He was the one of the prominent bodhisattvas, Manjushri, Avalokiteshvara, and Vajrapani. So Vajrapani ततः चतुर्वर्षशत परिनिर्वितस्य मम वज्रपाणेः कनिष्को नाम राजा भविष्यति स कनिष्कः अस्मिन् प्रदेशे स्तूपं प्रतिष्ठापयति. It is written in the Gilgit. So they are talking about Kanishka's coronation 400 years after the Nirvana of Vajrapani, not from the Buddha Nirvana. There is a Saddharma Ratna Pitaka Sutra which refers to that. Kanishka became a king 700 years after Buddha Nirvana. It means we have to calculate 700 years from 1865 BC, but from Vajrapani's Nirvana 400 years. Both you can reconcile both the dates. There is no contradiction at all. So let us astronomical reference like Megha and Manogyaji, they refer to Sanyukta Nikaya, but I have not found that Magha can be, but after winter solstice, before Vaishakha Purnima, there was a lunar eclipse followed by a solar eclipse took place in Shravasti. So these are the dates, 8th March. It can be Magha in case Kshayamasa existed. It can be Falguna. Both is possible, and solar eclipse 22nd. And another reference in Mahavansha that is most prominent and exactly written, because in Mahavansha it is written that Buddha visited Sri Lanka 3 times. 9 months after his enlightenment, 5 years after his enlightenment, and almost 9th year after enlightenment. So during the 9th month, they talk about Phussa. Phussa is it's a Pushya in Pali. So in Pushya Masa, there was a lunar and solar both eclipses occurred. We have to calculate from 1944 because the zero due to 0 year, because this NASA software assumes 0 year also. So 1904, after 5 years enlightenment also, they talk about in Krishna Paksha of Chaitra. So it was suddenly a solar eclipse that took place very close to, because when Buddha visited, 2 kings of Nagadvipa in Sri Lanka, they were fighting with each other. So he went there to resolve the conflict. So during that war, a solar eclipse, a darkness fell, it is written. So based on that, it is an assumption that there is a solar eclipse existed. So how can we reconcile this traditional Indic chronology? Because the Mahabharata, Puranas talk about only Pradyotas, Shishunagas. We, the colonial historians simply assume that the Ashoka and the Bimbisara, Ajatashatru are Shishunagas. But Buddha Charita talks about Haryankas. So both are 2 different dynasties. Only during the time of Shishunagas, because the Buddhist sources refer to Shishunagas as the kings of Vaishali, not Magadha. So it appears that during the reign of Shishunaga is the Lichavi king who occupied Kashi, and later he conquered Magadha. So finally they went back to Vaishali when Haryanka dynasty conquered the Rajagriha. So Puranas, many kings and kingdoms existed, but I don't know why Haryanka, because Mahavansha talks about they're all patricide, means every son killed his father in the dynasty. Like Ajatashatru killed Bimbisara and Udayi killed the Ajatashatru, then his son killed him. So finally they fed up, who is this, what is the nonsense of going? So they selected one Shishunaga. He may be, my assumption is, he was the person, a relative of a Kashmir king. They selected him as a king. His son was Ashoka. Maybe Kashmir, Ashoka and the Ashoka are the same. So this way we can reconcile if we, this Jain sources talking about only Mahavira. There is the 11th Shishya, there 11 Ganadharas were the direct disciples of Mahavira. One Ganadhara's name was Mauryaputra. How Mauryaputra existed during the time of Mahavira, if he was he is the contemporary of Buddha. So Mahavira, after almost 664 years after Buddha Nirvana, he attained Nirvana around 1189 BC. That I have calculated based on the 583 BC. You calculate 605 years after 583 BC. So then finally let us the Chinese, because we have to tackle with this. Upali he put one dot, correct, no problem. Thereafter, the Dasaka, Sonaka, so Mogaliputta Tissa Chandavajji, okay. Then a Sanghabhadra, he was the Hinayana scholar. Actually, he was the contemporary of Vasubandhu. All Chinese sources and even Indian sources refer that Vasubandhu lived after 900 years. So Sanghabhadra also, so Sanghabhadra certainly put 975th dot. Now the problem is the Chinese king, the contemporary of Sanghabhadra. It is written Wuti or Ying Ming of Qin dynasty. It is whether it is the early Qin dynasty or when they separated southern and northern Qin dynasty. So they selected the Xiao Zhe. So that 482, they say, is 7th regnal year 489. So they calculated back. But in my opinion, he has to be Ying Zheng of, because that Wuti, Wu, many Chinese king had this title. But Wuti this is the first title. The T is equivalent to Deva in Indian context, in Sanskrit. So this Wuti, the title never existed after the early Qin dynasty. It's only early Qin dynasty had the title ending with T. So that's why Vasubandhu's date is this and the Sanghabhadra's date is this. So we can explain every tradition, either Chinese, Tibetan, Burmese, Sri Lankan, Indian, later Magadha. But there are two monuments, but there is a third monumental blunder. The Sri Lankan and Burmese clubbed the 1765 BC and 18 because Theravada Buddhism epoch and the Buddha Nirvana epoch. Due to that 100 years error. So the Ashoka, Maurya Ashoka was not the Ashoka. It was the Kala Ashoka, was the real Ashoka who flourished 100 years later. Thank you.